There is a question that sits quietly beneath every fossil, every living creature, every atom of your own body. A question older than humanity, older than Earth's first breath. How did life become what it is? Evolution is not just a theory. It is the hidden pulse of the planet, a slow, relentless force, shaping every form, every instinct, every possibility of life. And yet, its true nature remains far more mysterious than we often imagine. Life did not simply appear fully formed. It changed, struggled, adapted, one small step at a time, guided by pressures we cannot see, and choices no organism ever consciously made. The first cells competed in a silent ocean. Creatures without eyes learned to sense light. Fins became limbs. Wings emerged where there were once only bones. And through billions of tiny changes, life refined itself into the astonishing diversity we see today. Tonight, we step into that slow, ancient current, the great unfolding of life across deep time. A story written not in words, but in DNA. A story that includes you and every living thing that has ever existed. Let us begin. Life on Earth did not begin with complexity or purpose. It began with something far more humble: chemistry. In the ancient oceans, beneath a sky choked with volcanic gases, simple molecules drifted, collided, and fused in an endless dance. Most interactions led nowhere, but a few rare combinations produced something extraordinary: structures capable of copying themselves. These early replicators were fragile, inconsistent, and astonishingly small, yet they carried within them the first spark of biological continuity. Evolution began not with intention, but with repetition. For millions of years, these primitive molecules competed in a silent ocean. Some copied themselves imperfectly, generating variations that altered their stability. Others folded into shapes that allowed them to survive a little longer or replicate a little faster. In this microscopic world, success was measured not in strength or intelligence, but in persistence. The molecules that endured became the ancestors of all future life. Their imperfections, the tiny errors we now call mutations, were not flaws, but the engine of change. Without them, life would have remained static, frozen in its earliest form. As time passed, these replicators wrapped themselves in membranes, forming the first cells. This simple boundary inside versus outside was one of the most significant steps in the history of life. Within those thin walls, chemistry gained direction. Cells protected their fragile components, concentrated resources, and built the first biological machinery. Some learned to harness sunlight, transforming radiant energy into chemical fuel. Others consumed organic molecules floating freely around them, and in their different strategies, we see the earliest roots of diversity. But evolution does not rush. It shapes life through countless small adjustments, each one building upon the last. It rewards what works, forgets what fails, and retains only the structures capable of surviving the relentless filtering of natural selection. In those quiet, ancient waters, cells began to cooperate, forming colonies, clusters capable of performing tasks no single cell could manage alone. These loose associations eventually became more organized, paving the way for the leap from single-celled to multicellular life, a transition so profound that it forever changed the trajectory of biology. Earth during this time was a world of slow miracles. The oceans thickened with microbial mats that carpeted the sea floor, generating oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. At first, this oxygen was toxic to most life, triggering extinctions and sweeping transformations. But evolution thrives on disruption. The new atmosphere allowed cells to extract far more energy from their food, fueling complexity on a scale previously unimaginable. With oxygen came opportunity, and the world began to shift toward forms more dynamic, more coordinated, more capable of interacting with the environment. In this early chapter of evolution, there were no eyes, no bones, no nervous systems. There was only change, deep, patient, cumulative change. A quiet, refining process that sculpted life molecule by molecule, generation by generation. And though the organisms were small and simple, the rules guiding them were universal: variation, selection, inheritance. These forces acted long before animals swam in the seas or plants rooted into the land. They shaped the foundation upon which all future complexity would rise. What began as drifting chemistry became the first cells. What began as solitary cells became communities, and from those communities, the blueprint for all complex life was born. As life continued its quiet experiment in the ancient seas, something remarkable began to take shape. The simple cells that once floated alone started to develop internal structures, tiny compartments dedicated to specialized tasks. These innovations did not appear suddenly. They emerged through countless small accidents of chemistry, each preserved only if it made survival more likely. Over time, these incremental refinements produced the first eukaryotic cells, organisms equipped with nuclei, organelles, and an internal architecture far more sophisticated than anything that came before. This leap in complexity remains one of the most important events in the history of evolution, a biological revolution unfolding silently in the depths of the ocean. One of the greatest breakthroughs came not from competition, but from cooperation. Scientists believe that mitochondria, the energy-producing structures present in nearly every complex cell, were once free-living bacteria, engulfed by a larger cell in a moment that changed the fate of life forever. Instead of digesting the smaller organism, the host cell formed a partnership with it. The bacterium provided a massive boost in energy production. The host provided protection and nutrients. Over millions of years, the two merged their destinies so completely that neither could survive alone. This groundbreaking symbiosis became the engine of multicellular evolution, giving cells the power to support greater size, complexity, and coordination. With newfound energy and structural sophistication, life began exploring new possibilities. Some cells specialized in movement, developing slender filaments that propelled them through water. Others focused on sensing chemicals, detecting nutrients, or responding to environmental fluctuations. Gradually, colonies of cells evolved division of labor, different cells performing different roles for the benefit of the whole. This refinement laid the foundation for tissues, organs, and bodies, long before such concepts had names. In the shallow seas where sunlight penetrated, these early multicellular organisms thrived. Their forms were simple, soft-bodied clusters drifting or anchored to the seafloor, but their existence marked a profound shift. For the first time, evolution had assembled life not as isolated units, but as integrated systems capable of coordination and specialization. These early bodies could bend, ripple, and react to the world around them with a fluidity no single cell could achieve. And as their interactions grew more complex, the landscape of life became a tapestry of newly emerging shapes and strategies. Still, the oceans were a world governed by chemistry. Nutrients were abundant in some regions and scarce in others. Temperature and salinity shifted with currents and seasons. Light faded with depth, creating distinct ecological zones rich with opportunity. Evolution responded not with grand leaps, but with thousands of tiny adjustments. Organisms that could sense changes in their surroundings gained small advantages, detecting gradients, responding to light, aligning their bodies with currents. These simple sensory abilities, rudimentary as they were, formed the earliest roots of perception. As complexity increased, so did the pace of evolutionary innovation. Genetic mutations accumulated, giving rise to new forms that pushed beyond previous limits. Some organisms developed rigid structures for support. Others created protective coatings against predators or harsh conditions. These changes did not occur in isolation. Each new adaptation influenced the evolution of others, triggering a cascade of interactions that would eventually explode into the greatest diversification of life the planet had ever witnessed. Yet at this stage, life remained modest, quiet, and largely unseen. There were no shells, no bones, no eyes reflecting the light of the sun. But beneath the surface, evolution was assembling the ingredients for the next great transformation. A transformation that would rewrite the biological possibilities of the world, because soon, life would learn to see. Soon, it would learn to hunt, and soon, the oceans would awaken with creatures unlike anything that had existed before. For billions of years, life remained soft and simple, cells drifting, absorbing, dividing, never rushing, never reaching beyond the boundaries of what was immediately possible. But then, in a relatively brief moment of deep time, something extraordinary happened. Roughly 541 million years ago, the oceans transformed from quiet expanses of microbial life into vast arenas of innovation. In what we now call the Cambrian explosion, evolution accelerated with a ferocity the planet had never seen. New body forms, new organs, new survival strategies all emerged in a geological blink, reshaping the trajectory of life forever. At the heart of this explosion was a singular innovation: vision, the ability to detect not just light, but shapes, edges, movement, the presence of another living being. Before this moment, life navigated the world through chemical gradients and the faint sense of light and dark. But as primitive eyes evolved, initially nothing more than light-sensitive patches, creatures began to gather information at a speed and precision that changed everything. The ocean, once ruled by slow reactions, now became a world where seeing meant anticipating, responding, escaping, hunting. The emergence of predators ignited an evolutionary arms race. Organisms that were once safe in their simplicity now needed protection. Some evolved shells, hard exoskeletons of calcium carbonate that fortified their bodies against attack. Others developed spines, plates, or flexible armor. Soft-bodied creatures reinvented themselves with speed, agility, and sensory awareness. Every innovation in offense triggered a counter-innovation in defense, and the cycle of adaptation spiraled into unprecedented complexity. Movement too underwent dramatic evolution. Fins formed, musculature strengthened. Creatures began to burrow, swim, dart, and crawl across newly structured seafloors. The first complex nervous systems emerged, intricate webs of cells capable of transmitting signals rapidly, coordinating bodies with fluid precision. These neural architectures allowed organisms not only to react, but to plan, giving rise to behaviors that bordered on strategy. This was the beginning of true agency in the animal world. The ocean floor became a stage of endless exploration. Some creatures developed jointed limbs for grasping and walking. Others grew elongated bodies that undulated through the water in serpentine waves. Trilobites, with their segmented armor and compound eyes, roamed the seabeds in vast numbers, leaving fossilized imprints of their journeys across ancient sand. Worm-like predators sliced through silt in search of prey. Filter feeders extended delicate structures into the currents, capturing microscopic organisms drifting past. Each form was a response to the ever-shifting pressures of survival, and each new form opened the door to countless others. What made this period so remarkable was not merely the diversity of shapes, but the explosion of possibility. Evolution experimented with body plans that would later give rise to all major animal groups: vertebrates, arthropods, mollusks, echinoderms, and more. The origins of bones, brains, joints, circulatory systems, and complex organs all trace back to these oceans. Even our own lineage, distant, fragile, and unassuming, can be traced to an early chordate swimming in the Cambrian waters, its simple nerve cord a primitive precursor to the spine. The Cambrian seas were not peaceful. They were turbulent, competitive, and endlessly experimental, an ecosystem in which survival demanded innovation. But beneath the chaos was an elegant truth. Life had discovered the power of complexity. What began as simple chemistry now blossomed into coordinated bodies, sensory worlds, and interactions rich with consequence. The ocean had awakened, creatures could see, and evolution, fueled by this new capacity for perception, would never again move at the slow pace it once knew. After millions of years of innovation in the oceans, evolution prepared for another extraordinary leap, one that would bring life from the weightless cradle of water onto the solid, unyielding surface of land. This shift was not dramatic or sudden. It was a slow, hesitant expansion, driven by opportunity, necessity, and the quiet pressure of natural selection. Yet its consequences were profound. In this transition, life reshaped its architecture, rewrote its strategies, and opened the door to entire ecosystems that would one day dominate the planet. The earliest pioneers of this transition were not bold adventurers, but creatures responding to subtle environmental pressures. As shallow coastal waters warmed and oxygen levels fluctuated, certain fish evolved stronger, more muscular fins, structures capable of pushing against the seafloor. These fins, at first used only to maneuver in murky, vegetation-filled lagoons, gradually became supports for navigating over rocks, mudflats, and temporary pools. Each step onto land was brief, tentative, and reversible. But with each generation, evolution strengthened the bones, broadened the joints, and refined the musculature. The foundations of limbs were being laid. The ability to breathe air was equally transformative. Some fish developed primitive lungs, simple sacs that gulped oxygen from the atmosphere when water grew stagnant. Others modified their gill structures to tolerate low oxygen conditions. These adaptations, initially survival mechanisms in unpredictable environments, became stepping stones toward full air-breathing anatomy. Slowly, the biological divide between fish and early tetrapods began to blur. Life was rehearsing for its next stage without yet knowing the stage existed. Meanwhile, the land itself was changing. Plants, mosses, and early vascular species had already colonized the coasts, shaping microhabitats with shade, humidity, and new sources of food. Insects crawled along the surfaces of these primitive forests, offering potential prey. The world above water was no longer empty. It was a frontier of opportunity, waiting for the right organisms to explore it. For those that could endure the harshness of land, gravity, dehydration, temperature swings, the payoff was enormous. Fewer predators, untouched resources, endless space to expand. The first true tetrapods, creatures with limbs ending in digits instead of fins, emerged from this evolutionary experimentation. Their bodies reflected a delicate balance between old and new. Skulls shaped by their aquatic ancestry, limbs capable of supporting their weight, and lungs strong enough to sustain life outside water. These early vertebrates did not stride confidently onto land. They dragged, crawled, and inched forward, venturing only short distances before returning to the safety of the water. But even these brief excursions were enough. Evolution had placed its foot, quite literally, on solid ground. Once life crossed this threshold, change accelerated. Limbs strengthened, spines adapted, rib cages expanded to protect organs now exposed to gravity. Sensory systems refined themselves for air instead of water, ears evolving to detect vibrations differently, eyes adjusting to the brightness of sunlight. Even skin transformed, becoming thicker and less permeable to prevent desiccation. Each adaptation solved a new problem created by the simple act of leaving the ocean. And with every solution, life gained the stability it needed to thrive on land. From these early tetrapods would come amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Every footstep on Earth today, from the silent glide of a gecko to the thunder of an elephant, is a distant echo of those first awkward movements across ancient shores. The animal kingdoms that now populate deserts, forests, mountains, and plains all owe their existence to the slow perseverance of creatures that refuse to remain confined to the sea. The great ascent to land was not a single moment, but a gradual awakening life, learning to stand, to breathe, to resist gravity, to push into new worlds. And in doing so, evolution gained an entire planet's worth of possibilities. The oceans had birthed complexity. The land would nurture diversity. As life secured its hold on land, the planet entered a new era, one defined by towering forests, deep-rooted ecosystems, and the emergence of creatures unlike anything the world had ever seen. The once barren continents transformed into sprawling green landscapes, rich with ferns, towering club mosses, and early trees that stretched upward in a race for sunlight. These ancient forests were not merely assemblages of plants. They were the architects of Earth's future atmosphere, stabilizing soils, trapping carbon, and altering the very composition of the air. With vast forests came new ecological possibilities. The dense vegetation created sheltered micro-worlds, humid understories, shaded floors, elevated canopies. Insects proliferated, feeding on leaves, wood, and decaying matter. Some grew to astonishing sizes in oxygen-rich air dragonflies, with wingspans of over 1/2 meter drifted through prehistoric skies. This abundance of insects and plant material formed the foundation of the first complex terrestrial food webs, inviting vertebrates to diversify and adapt. Amphibians, the earliest land vertebrates, thrived in the warm, swampy environments, but they remained tethered to water, their eggs and skins requiring moisture. This dependence limited their expansion. It left niches unfilled and opportunities open. Evolution, ever patient, stepped forward with another innovation, one that would free vertebrates from the constraints of water forever: the amniotic egg. This breakthrough was biological liberation. Reptiles, the first creatures to wield this advantage, encased their embryos in protective membranes, allowing development to occur safely on dry land. No longer bound to the margins of ponds and rivers, they could wander deeper into forests, climb higher into the canopy, or explore open plains. Their scales reduced water loss. Their stronger skeletons supported greater mobility. Their internal physiology adapted beautifully to terrestrial life. Reptiles became the first true masters of the land. As they spread across the continents, their forms diversified. Some remained small and agile, darting between vegetation. Others grew into armored giants, their bodies plates of bone and keratin. Some evolved elongated jaws filled with sharp teeth. Others developed crushing molars suited for plants. The world responded to their presence with equal creativity. Plants formed tougher leaves. Insects evolved new defenses. Predators and prey co-evolved in a perpetual dance, each adaptation fueling another, each generation refining the balance between survival and extinction. Meanwhile, the forests themselves were shaping Earth in ways both subtle and profound. Their deep root systems captured and sequestered enormous amounts of carbon, gradually cooling the planet. Their fallen trunks and branches accumulated in thick layers, forming coal beds that would lie dormant for hundreds of millions of years. These forests altered weather patterns, influenced rainfall, and provided stable habitats for the creatures that depended on them. The land became a tapestry of interlocking ecosystems, each one a reflection of countless evolutionary decisions. As reptiles gained dominance, their bodies and behaviors grew increasingly bold. Some returned to the water, becoming powerful swimmers. Others ventured into arid regions, surviving where amphibians could not. Their eggs protected their lineage. Their scales protected their bodies. Their lungs and circulatory systems carried them across climates that would have destroyed early tetrapods. These adaptations made reptiles the most versatile land animals of their time. The stage was set, with forests expanding, insects thriving, reptiles rising, and Earth's climate stabilizing. The planet prepared for its next great transformation, one that would bring forth the age of giants, reshape continents, and elevate evolutionary ambition to a scale never before seen. But even in these early moments, evolution was already hinting at what was coming. A lineage of reptiles that would eventually dominate the skies, the seas, and the land itself. The world was growing more dynamic, more complex, more interconnected. And in the shadows of those ancient forests, the first ancestors of the dinosaurs were beginning to stir. As millions of years unfolded, Earth entered a grand and dramatic chapter, one shaped by shifting continents, rising mountains, expanding deserts, and forests that stretched from horizon to horizon. In this dynamic world, reptiles continued to diversify, and among them emerged a lineage unlike any before, the archosaurs. From these ancient ancestors came creatures that would one day define an entire era. Creatures whose forms would dominate every corner of the planet. Their evolution marked the dawn of the dinosaurs. The climate of the Triassic period was harsh but full of opportunity. Continents were fused into a single colossal landmass, known as Pangaea, a vast expanse that created extremes of heat, aridity, and seasonal variation. Such conditions favored adaptability, resilience, and innovation traits that early dinosaurs possessed in abundance. Their upright posture allowed efficient movement. Their lungs and circulatory systems supported active lifestyles, and their lightweight bones gave them speed unheard of in previous reptiles. They were built not just to survive, but to explore. At first, dinosaurs were small, fleet-footed hunters darting between the shadows of conifer forests, scavengers picking over the remains of larger reptiles, and herbivores browsing low vegetation. But evolution, sensing opportunity in the vast, unclaimed niches of Pangaea, began to push these creatures toward new extremes. Over tens of millions of years, dinosaurs expanded in size, shape, and ecological role. Some grew into behemoths whose footsteps shook the earth. Others became agile predators with razor-sharp teeth and lightning reflexes. Still others evolved feathers initially for insulation, later for display, and eventually for flight. The dinosaur lineage was not a single form. It was a symphony of possibilities shaped by the world around it. Meanwhile, Earth itself was undergoing profound changes. As tectonic forces split Pangaea apart, rifts filled with new seas, climates diversified, and ecosystems fractured into isolated regions. This geographic separation accelerated evolution. Populations that were once connected diverged into entirely new species, each adapting to its own environment. Deserts formed in some regions, lush swamps in others, volcanic plains in still others. Dinosaurs spread into all of them, their bodies molding to the demands of each new landscape. In the oceans, reptilian descendants took to the water, developing streamlined bodies and powerful tails that allowed them to dominate marine environments. In the skies, pterosaurs emerged, gliding first, then soaring with wings of stretched membrane. Life was no longer confined to land or sea. It had claimed the air as well. Earth became a planet of layered ecosystems, forests teeming with herbivores, plains patrolled by hunters, coastlines alive with amphibious reptiles, skies filled with aerial predators, and seas ruled by marine giants, each realm intertwined with the others, creating a web of life more complex than anything that had come before. Plants, too, evolved alongside these giants. Flowering plants appeared, transforming landscapes with bursts of color and scent, forging new relationships with insects and animals. These botanical innovations reshaped food sources, reproduction strategies, and entire ecosystems. Pollinators diversified in response, their bodies evolving to match the structures of newly emerging flowers. The world became a mosaic of ecological partnerships, each reinforcing the expansion of life in new directions. Dinosaurs thrived not because they were destined to, but because evolution rewarded their adaptability. They endured droughts, volcanic eruptions, climatic shifts, and competition. Their forms became more specialized, long-necked sauropods that browsed treetops, horned and armored dinosaurs that defended themselves with elaborate shields and spikes, swift predators that hunted in coordinated groups. Each adaptation was a response to the pressures of an ever-changing world. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs were the dominant creatures on Earth. They witnessed the splitting of continents, the rise and fall of mountain ranges, the birth of new oceans, and the transformation of forests and plains. Their reign was not fleeting, it was vast, deep, and resilient. And yet, despite their dominance, evolution was quietly preparing the next chapter, one that would emerge from the shadows of these giants. High above the forests, small feathered dinosaurs were already flapping, gliding, and experimenting with new motions. In their bodies lay the blueprint for a lineage that would one day inherit the skies and survive even the greatest extinction the Earth had yet to face. As the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods unfolded, Earth entered one of the most vibrant and biologically rich eras in its history. The continents had drifted further apart. Climates had stabilized into warm, humid regimes, and ecosystems flourished with astonishing complexity. This was the zenith of the dinosaur world, a time when life expanded into every available niche, when evolution sculpted creatures of breathtaking diversity, and when the rhythm of existence pulsed with a confidence that seemed as though it might last forever. Forests stretched across continents in endless waves of green. Towering conifers and giant cycads formed vast canopies, while ferns carpeted the forest floors. Flowering plants continued their silent revolution, spreading into new landscapes with delicate blooms that attracted an ever-evolving array of insects. The partnership between plants and pollinators grew more intricate with each passing generation, weaving a tapestry of ecological dependencies that shaped the future of terrestrial life. Herbivorous dinosaurs, enormous in both size and influence, moved through these forests like living landscapes. Sauropods, the colossal long-necked giants, roamed in herds, their footsteps shaping riverbeds and carving pathways through dense vegetation. Their necks, some longer than a city bus, allowed them to feed at heights unreachable by other creatures. Each bite of foliage was part of a larger ecological cycle. Leaves consumed, digested, decomposed, and returned to the soil, fueling the growth of new generations of plants. The land thrived under this ceaseless exchange. Predators, in turn, adapted to match the scale and power of their prey. Massive theropods, with jaws built for bone-crushing force, patrolled riverbanks and plains. Smaller, more agile hunters moved in coordinated packs, using strategy where brute strength was not enough. Their sensory systems sharpened, their limbs strengthened, their social structures evolved, each refinement enhancing their ability to survive in a world defined by competition and opportunity. In the skies, pterosaurs soared with vast wingspans, riding thermal currents above the forests and oceans. Some species grew larger than any flying animal before or since, their shapes casting shadows that rippled across ancient coastlines. The air was alive with movement, flocks, gliders, divers, each species exploring the possibilities of flight in its own way. Among them, small feathered dinosaurs were taking their first true wing beats, refining the anatomy that would one day give rise to birds. Beneath the surface of the seas, marine reptiles ruled. Plesiosaurs with long, elegant necks glided through clear waters. Mosasaurs, powerful and serpentine, dominated the open ocean. Fish and ammonites filled the depths with swirling currents of life, while coral reefs formed complex underwater metropolises. The oceans were no longer lonely expanses, they were thriving worlds with their own hierarchies, dramas, and evolutionary experiments. Through all this diversity, Earth's systems operated in delicate harmony. Carbon cycled between forests and atmosphere. Nutrients flowed through rivers, soils, and oceans. climates stabilized through the interplay of atmospheric gases, global currents, and widespread vegetation. Life was not merely surviving, it was sculpting the planet itself, influencing temperature, oxygen levels, rainfall patterns, and the very shape of ecosystems. The biosphere had become a self-sustaining engine, propelled by evolution's quiet persistence. And yet, even in this age of abundance, the seeds of fragility lay beneath the surface. Diversity brings resilience, but it also ties species together in ways that can amplify disruption. A world so interdependent, so finely tuned, can shift dramatically with abrupt environmental change. Deep within the Earth, tectonic forces brewed, volcanic provinces were forming, climate patterns were subtly shifting. The planet, though vibrant, was never still. Far above, in the silent cold of space, an object continued its ancient orbit, one that had not yet intersected with Earth, but eventually would. Its trajectory was not a warning, not yet a threat, simply a possibility suspended in the cosmos. But evolution, unaware of what lay ahead, continued its quiet work, shaping life for a world that was about to be transformed in an instant. For now, though, the age of giants reigned. Life moved with confidence. Forests breathed deeply, and the earth, radiant and teeming, felt eternal. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs commanded the earth with an elegance and power unmatched in the history of life. Their reign spanned shifting continents, rising oceans, and changing climates. They adapted, diversified, survived, and seemed almost invincible. Yet evolution is shaped not only by the quiet pressures of natural selection, but also by sudden, cataclysmic events. And one such event was approaching from the dark quiet of space, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. Roughly 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid nearly 10 kilometers across drifted through the void on a trajectory that, by pure cosmic chance, intersected with Earth. It carried no malice, no intention. It was simply a fragment of ancient rock obeying the laws of gravity. But in its path lay a world of unimaginable beauty. Forests alive with birdsong, seas filled with reptiles and fish, plains trembling under the footsteps of giants, a world utterly unaware of the shadow descending upon it. When the asteroid entered the atmosphere, it tore through the sky at over 70,000 kilometers per hour. The air before it compressed and heated to incandescent temperatures. Trees below ignited before the object even touched the ground. And then, in a moment so brief it defies comprehension, the asteroid struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, with a force equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. The ground liquefied, mountains vaporized. The ocean recoiled in towering waves. A crater over 150 kilometers wide was carved into the crust of the Earth, and vast quantities of molten rock and dust were ejected into the atmosphere, rising far beyond the reach of clouds. The shockwave spread across continents, flattening forests and shattering ecosystems. Wildfires erupted globally, ignited by the searing heat of ejecta, re-entering the atmosphere like a rain of falling stars. But the greatest devastation came not from the impact itself, but from what followed. The dust, ash, and aerosols suspended in the air formed a dense veil that blocked sunlight for months, perhaps years. Photosynthesis collapsed almost instantly. Plants withered, food chains disintegrated, herbivores starved, predators followed, and the intricate balance of life unraveled at astonishing speed. Temperatures plummeted. Acid rain scorched the land. The oceans grew dark and cold. The dinosaurs, once the masters of Earth, found themselves in a world where their size, strength, and specialization became liabilities. Those adapted to stable climates and abundant vegetation could not endure the sudden scarcity. Entire lineages vanished in a geological blink. But extinction, devastating as it was, did not mark an end. It marked a transformation. In the shadows of this collapse, smaller creatures, birds, mammals, insects, resilient plants found footholds in the fractured landscape. Their size required less energy, their diets were more flexible, their reproduction rates faster. They survived not through dominance, but through adaptability. Evolution pivoted. The ancient reign of the dinosaurs gave way to a new era, one defined by resilience, reinvention, and the slow rebuilding of ecological order. The sky had fallen, but life endured, not unchanged, not unscarred, but alive. And in the wake of catastrophe, evolution discovered new possibilities, setting the stage for the next great chapter of life on Earth, a chapter that would eventually give rise to us. When the fires dimmed and the dust finally began to settle, Earth lay in silence. The great forests were reduced to charcoal. The seas held a cold stillness. The once flourishing continents were littered with the remains of creatures that had shaped an age. The world that followed the impact was not merely altered, it was unrecognizable. Yet beneath this devastation, in the cracks of the shattered ecosystem, life was preparing its slow return. The first survivors were not the giants that once dominated the land, but the small, resilient creatures whose modest needs became their greatest advantage. Insects, with their rapid reproduction and astonishing adaptability, began to reclaim the world first. Plants, emerging from resistant seeds and deep root systems, pushed new shoots through the ash, reaching for the light as the skies gradually cleared. Their return marked the beginning of a long healing, a slow greening of the earth after months or years of darkness. Among the animals that endured were the early mammals, small and unassuming, their ancestors having lived for tens of millions of years in the shadows of the dinosaurs. They were nocturnal, furtive, and largely unnoticed during the age of giants, but they possessed traits that now became invaluable. Warm-blooded bodies, capable of surviving temperature swings, diverse diets, curious behaviors, and the ability to care for their young in ways no reptile could match. While the dinosaurs could not adapt swiftly enough to the transformed world, these mammals were ready. With the extinction of the dominant predators and herbivores, vast ecological spaces lay empty niches waiting to be filled. Evolution abhors emptiness. It responds to opportunity with experimentation. And in this newly opened world, mammals began to diverge, expand, and reinvent themselves. Some remained small and agile, scurrying among the debris in search of insects and seeds. Others took to the trees, developing gripping hands and binocular vision. Some ventured into the water, reshaping their limbs into paddles and their bodies into streamlining curves. Still others grew larger, discovering the potential of open plains and recovering forests. The earth, once again warming and brightening, offered abundant new resources. Flowers returned, followed by the insects that depended on them. Fruit-bearing plants spread across continents, encouraging mammals to explore new diets and develop new digestive systems. The interplay between plants and animals intensified, creating new relationships, pollination, partnerships, seed dispersal networks, predator-prey dynamics. Each interaction pushed evolution further along its branching pathways. In this slow resurgence, time became an ally. 10,000 years, 100,000, millions. With each passing generation, mammals diversified into forms increasingly distinct from one another. Early ungulates evolved stronger limbs for running. Carnivorous species sharpened their senses for hunting. Primates developed larger brains and more complex social behaviors. The world, once emptied by catastrophe, became filled again with motion, sound, and life different from before, but no less vibrant. The oceans, too, transformed. Marine mammals, descendants of land-dwelling ancestors, returned to the sea, giving rise to whales and dolphins, giants born not from reptilian lineage, but from warm-blooded creatures that had once walked on four legs. Their evolution defied expectations, bending the trajectory of life back toward the water in one of the most dramatic reversals in natural history. Yet the most profound change was not in any single lineage, but in the overall structure of Earth's biosphere. With dinosaurs gone, ecosystems reorganized around new rules, food chains shifted, climate cycles stabilized, forests regrew, shaping the air and soil once more. Planetary systems recovered from the shock, guided by the enduring resilience of life's smallest, most flexible forms. From devastation came opportunity, from emptiness came innovation, and from the shadows of ancient forests, a lineage was slowly taking shape, one that would eventually walk upright, wield tools, ponder its own existence, and look back across the vastness of time to understand the forces that made it possible. But that part of the story was still far away. For now, Earth was simply learning to breathe again. As the world recovered from the Great Extinction, mammals entered a period of extraordinary opportunity. The once dominant giants were gone, and in their absence, the Earth became a vast landscape of open niches, ecosystems waiting for new inhabitants, new ideas, new forms. The mammals that had survived by being small, quiet, and adaptable now found themselves in a world where they could grow larger, move farther, and experiment with entirely new ways of living. Evolution, freed from the constraints of the dinosaur age, began a slow but relentless transformation that would eventually lead to the emergence of minds capable of reflection, imagination, and wonder. At first, the changes were subtle. Bodies lengthened, limbs strengthened, diets diversified. But more profound shifts were happening beneath the surface within the architecture of the mammalian brain. Mammals had always possessed a special neurological advantage: the neocortex, a structure capable of processing complex information, integrating sensory inputs, and supporting behaviors more flexible than anything seen in reptiles. As mammals diversified, this structure expanded, allowing for improved memory, learning, social communication, and problem-solving. The seeds of intelligence were taking root. Among the branches of the mammalian tree, a particular group began to distinguish itself: the primates. Their origins were humble, small, nocturnal creatures that scurried among branches, relying on grasping hands, sensitive fingers, and large forward-facing eyes. But these simple adaptations had enormous consequences. Living in trees required coordination, depth perception, planning, and refined motor skills. Predators lurked, branches shifted, distances deceived, The individuals that could better judge space, remember routes, and cooperate with companions gained an advantage. Evolution responded by enhancing their brains, their senses, and their social behavior. The first true primates emerged in a world rich with forests, where light filtered through leaves in shifting patterns and food sources changed with the seasons. Their vision became sharper, their color perception more nuanced. Their hands evolved with unprecedented mobility, allowing them to grasp, explore, and manipulate their environment. These early primates began to form social groups, developing communication strategies, grooming rituals, and alliances that strengthened their survival. In these interactions lay the earliest foundations of empathy, cooperation, and the complex emotional landscapes that would one day define human experience. As continents drifted and climates shifted, primate evolution branched into new directions. Some lineages remained in dense forests, evolving into lemurs and lorises. Others adapted to open environments, giving rise to monkeys with expressive faces, intricate vocalizations, and increasingly complex social hierarchies. Competition for resources, the need to raise vulnerable offspring, and the benefits of group living all encouraged the growth of larger brains and more sophisticated behaviors. But evolution's most ambitious experiment was unfolding in Africa, where a lineage of primates began to descend from the trees and explore the world on foot. Environmental pressures, drying forests, expanding grasslands, shifting weather patterns shaped them into new forms. Stronger legs for walking long distances, hands freed from locomotion, increasing reliance on cooperation, tool use, and shared knowledge. These changes did not happen overnight. They accumulated across hundreds of thousands of generations, each step building on the last, each adaptation laying the groundwork for something unprecedented in the history of life. What distinguished these early hominins was not merely their posture or their tools, but the growing complexity of their social world. Raising young required cooperation. Navigating open landscapes demanded communication. Sharing food encouraged fairness and memory. Hunting in groups rewarded planning and trust. The developing brain did not evolve in isolation, it evolved in response to the minds around it. Intelligence became a collective achievement, a property emerging from relationships as much as from individual neurons. In these early communities, we see the first glimmers of imagination, the ability to think beyond the immediate moment, to anticipate outcomes, to learn not only from experience, but from one another. The same evolutionary forces that shaped limbs and lungs were now shaping thought, emotion, and identity. The story of life was becoming the story of minds. Far from the towering reptiles of the past, the world was now guided by creatures whose greatest tool was not size or strength, but cognition. And in this shift, evolution prepared the stage for the next chapter, a chapter in which a particular lineage of primates would stand fully upright, look outward beyond the horizon, and begin to question the world around them. As the forests of Africa slowly gave way to open grasslands, the lives of early hominins began to transform. What had once been a world of branches, leaves, and shifting shadows became a vast expanse of horizon and sky. This new environment demanded new strategies, new bodies, new minds, new ways of existing. Evolution, shaped by scarcity and opportunity, began the slow sculpting of a creature unlike any that had lived before. The first major transformation was posture. Standing upright freed the hands, elevated the eyes, and changed the relationship between the body and the world. With each step across the savanna, early hominins strengthened their legs, balanced their spines, and developed hips suited for endurance walking. Their arms, no longer needed for locomotion, became instruments of exploration. These early ancestors could now carry food, tools, and infants while moving long distances, a shift that subtly reshaped their social structure and survival strategies. Hands, once used primarily for grasping branches, now took on a deeper purpose. With increased dexterity, hominins began shaping stones first by accident, then with intention. Simple flakes chipped from river rocks became cutting tools, allowing access to new food sources. Sharp edges split bone, released marrow, and opened a path to higher calorie nutrition. This change in diet fueled another evolutionary leap: larger brains. The increased energy afforded by meat and cooked food supported neural growth, enhancing memory, cognition, and planning. But perhaps the most transformative innovation of all was the mastery of fire. At first, early humans may have feared it: lightning fires sweeping across dry plains, crackling unpredictably in the night. But gradually, through observation and opportunity, they learned to harness its power. Fire provided warmth, protection from predators, and a means to cook food, making nutrients easier to digest and releasing energy crucial for brain expansion. Around glowing embers, social bonds deepened, stories were shared, knowledge passed from one generation to the next. The flickering light of fire became the cradle of early culture. As communities formed, cooperation became essential. Caring for young, a long, vulnerable process in our lineage encouraged stronger social ties. Individuals depended on one another, not just for survival, but for learning, memory, and emotional stability. Group living fostered empathy, communication, and reciprocity. Early humans began using gestures and vocalizations to coordinate activities. Over countless generations, these primitive sounds evolved towards something more structured, an early form of language, fragile yet revolutionary. The landscape itself shaped these emerging minds. Wide open plains required awareness of distant dangers and opportunities. Migration patterns of animals demanded planning and mobility. Seasonal changes necessitated memory and foresight. The brain responded by expanding regions responsible for problem-solving, spatial reasoning, and social interaction. Each challenge pushed cognition further, building the foundation of human intelligence layer by layer. Stone tools became more refined. Wooden implements appeared. Early humans learned to flake obsidian with surgical precision, to shape spears, to grind grain, to weave simple fibers. These technologies were not merely tools, they were expressions of thought, manifestations of memory and creativity taking physical form. Culture, once faint and fragile, began to solidify into a force that shaped evolution itself. The environment no longer acted solely upon humans. Humans, in their own small way, began acting upon the environment. Across Africa, new species of hominins emerged, some robust and powerful, others slender and agile. Some became extinct, others carried forward their strengths. Among them were ancestors who would eventually give rise to Homo erectus, the first human species capable of long-distance migration. Their bodies were built for endurance, their hands skilled at crafting tools, their minds attuned to cooperation. They spread far beyond Africa, walking into unfamiliar landscapes, adapting to new climates, and shaping the next stage of human evolution. And still, the story was only beginning. In the restless firelight of early camps, the seeds of consciousness were growing. Minds were learning not only to survive the world, but to imagine it, to see not just what is, but what could be. A quiet revolution was unfolding, one that would ultimately lead to art, language, technology, and the vast tapestry of human culture. But for now, these early humans simply walked across the savannah, leaving faint footprints in the dust, footprints that evolution would follow toward a destiny unlike any other in the history of life. As early hominin species diversified across Africa, one lineage began to stand out, not through brute strength or size, but through endurance, adaptability, and a growing mastery over tools and fire. This was Homo erectus, a species that would not only survive in challenging environments, but would, for the first time in Earth's history, walk out of its birthplace and explore the wider world. Their journey marked a turning point in evolution, the moment when a creature's destiny expanded beyond the boundaries of a single continent. The body of Homo erectus was uniquely suited for travel. Long legs, narrow hips, and strong tendon structures formed a frame optimized for efficient, sustained movement. Unlike earlier hominins, whose bodies were adapted to climbing or short bursts of speed, Homo erectus could walk and run long distances with remarkable endurance. This ability allowed them to follow herds, track seasons, and seek new resources across vast landscapes. Their migrations were slow, steady, and persistent, carried forward not by intention, but by survival. Their technology reflected an increasingly sophisticated mind. Stone tools became more symmetrical, more refined, and more specialized. Hand axes, tear-shaped tools chipped with deliberate skill, appeared across Africa, Europe, and Asia, marking the presence of Homo erectus like signatures written in stone. These tools were not merely functional. They revealed planning, precision, and the ability to envision a shape before creating it. For the first time, humans were thinking not just in the present moment, but ahead, imagining possibilities, anticipating needs. Fire, too, shaped their evolution in profound ways. Controlled flames provided warmth during cold nights, protection from predators, and a communal center where social bonds formed. Cooking transformed the human diet, breaking down tough fibers, increasing caloric intake, and reducing the energy needed for digestion. Over generations, this shift freed biological resources to support larger brains. Around campfires, the foundations of human culture deepened. Shared meals, cooperative strategies, teaching, storytelling, seeds of traditions that would echo across millennia. As Homo erectus expanded outward, they encountered new environments unlike anything in their ancestral homelands. Dense forests in Southeast Asia, rugged mountains in Eurasia, arid deserts stretching across Arabia, each demanded new adaptations. Clothing crafted from hides provided insulation against colder climates. Stone tools diversified to suit different materials and prey. Social groups grew more cohesive, relying on cooperation to hunt, gather, and navigate unknown terrain. With each migration, the species evolved in subtle ways. Populations separated by mountains or oceans developed distinct traits, shaped by local conditions. Smaller communities required stronger bonds. Harsh environments demanded innovation. The brain expanded further, not in sudden leaps, but through generations of incremental refinement. The capacity for imitation, learning, and cultural memory became central to survival. These early humans did not travel alone. Along their routes, they shaped the ecosystems they entered. Fires cleared landscapes for grazing animals. Tool use changed patterns of predation. Over time, their presence left faint ecological footprints, early hints of the profound influence Homo sapiens would one day wield. Yet Homo erectus was not a single species frozen in time. They were the beginning of a branching evolutionary river, flowing into countless tributaries. Some lineages adapted to island life, shrinking in size. Others grew larger, stronger, or more intelligent. And somewhere within this expanding tapestry, new species would emerge: Homo heidelbergensis, Homo naledi, Homo floresiensis, and eventually Homo sapiens. But the defining legacy of Homo erectus was not their tools or their fire. It was their courage, unintentional but profound, to leave the familiar behind and embrace the uncertainty of new worlds. Their footsteps, pressed into the soils of continents they never knew existed, became the first true marks of a species not confined by geography. The great migrations of Homo erectus set the stage for everything that would follow. The rise of language, the birth of culture, the spread of ideas, and the eventual emergence of minds capable of contemplating the story of life itself. As Homo erectus spread across continents, evolution continued its quiet work, refining bodies, sharpening minds, and weaving new threads into the tapestry of humanity. From these ancient wanderers emerged new species, offspring of time, shaped by climate, landscape, and the relentless pressure to adapt. Among them were Homo heidelbergensis, a robust and intelligent lineage that would become the bridge between the ancient world and the dawn of human complexity. Homo heidelbergensis possessed larger brains than their predecessors, brains capable of strategic hunting, coordinated cooperation, and the first hints of symbolic thinking. They hunted large game with wooden spears, collaborating in organized groups. This level of cooperation required communication, trust, and shared intention. Around their campfires, early forms of social structure took shape. Elder knowledge, shared responsibilities, and perhaps the beginnings of teaching. Their societies were not yet governed by language as we know it, but by gestures, rhythms, memories, and emotion, primitive yet profound. As time flowed forward, populations of Homo heidelbergensis diverged. In the cold, harsh landscapes of Ice Age Europe, one lineage evolved into the Neanderthals, humans of immense strength, with bodies built to endure freezing temperatures and challenging terrain. Their muscles were powerful, their bones thick, their senses keen. But their most remarkable feature was not physical, it was cognitive. Neanderthals crafted tools with remarkable precision. They shaped stone flakes into scrapers, blades, and points. They created adhesives from tree resin, mastered fire, and built shelters from wood, bone, and hide. They cared for their injured, buried their dead, and adorned themselves with pigments and ornaments. In these expressions, we see the early spark of symbolism, the understanding that objects can represent identity, memory, status, or grief. Their world was not solely shaped by survival, it was shaped by meaning. Meanwhile, in Africa, another lineage was emerging, one that would eventually reshape the destiny of the planet. These early humans possessed lighter bodies and increasingly complex brains. They developed social networks spanning larger distances, traded materials across regions, and crafted tools with unprecedented diversity. Their lives required long learning periods, which fostered deep cooperation, shared caregiving, and emotional bonds that extended beyond immediate family. What made these early humans different was not simply intelligence, but meta-intelligence, the ability to think about thought, to imagine what others imagine, to sense intention, belief, and emotion in the minds of peers. This emerging cognitive empathy laid the foundation for something extraordinary: culture. Songs, rituals, coordinated hunts, shared stories. These activities created a rich social environment in which ideas shaped behavior and behavior shaped evolution. Every tool carried memory. Every fire carried tradition. Every gesture carried meaning. As language began its slow evolution, the human mind transformed. No longer confined to the present moment, early humans began to carry the past with them: lessons, warnings, dreams, and project their imagination toward the future. This ability to envision possibilities became one of the greatest evolutionary advantages any species has ever possessed. The Ice Age world challenged Neanderthals and early humans alike. Harsh winters, shifting herds, volcanic eruptions, and unpredictable climates demanded flexibility. In these pressures, the human mind strengthened its capacity for adaptation. Problem-solving evolved into innovation. Cooperation evolved into social strategy. Memory evolved into tradition. Across Europe and Asia, Neanderthals refined their way of life, resilient, efficient, deeply connected to their landscapes. In Africa, early humans refined something else: versatility. Their minds embraced novelty, allowing them to experiment, adapt, and spread ideas quickly. They carved bone tools, drilled shells for jewelry, created pigments for art, and shaped cultures that grew more elaborate with each passing generation. And somewhere in this vast mosaic of ancient humans, evolution prepared for a monumental convergence, a moment when two remarkable lineages would meet, exchange not only territory but genes, and shape the future of our species. The world was on the cusp of a transformation. Humanity, complex, emotional, intelligent, was about to take its next great step. Around 300,000 years ago, in the shifting savannas and river valleys of Africa, a new kind of human began to appear. Their bodies were graceful, their movements efficient, and their minds, though still young, held a potential unlike anything that had existed before. These were Homo sapiens, carriers of an evolutionary spark that would one day illuminate the world. They descended from ancient lineages, yet their brains were wired for something profoundly different: abstraction, creativity, fluidity of thought. In their minds lay the seeds of art, language, myth, and all that would come to define human identity. Early Homo sapiens lived in complex social groups bound by cooperation and shared memory. Their communication grew richer, more layered, no longer merely signals or warnings, but expressions of intention, emotion, humor, and imagination. They began to paint the world with meaning: symbols carved into ochre, patterns etched into bone, shells strung into jewelry. These creations were more than decoration. They were the first whispers of culture, the moment humanity began to reshape reality through shared belief. Their adaptability became their greatest strength. Unlike species bound to narrow climates, Homo sapiens could thrive in savannas, forests, coasts and deserts. They crafted clothing from hides, built shelters from wood and stone, and developed tools of increasing sophistication. Spears with fire-hardened tips, blades chipped with mathematical precision, needles made from bone. Their technology evolved not through chance alone, but through teaching, imitation, and innovation knowledge passed from mind to mind. With rising populations and expanding curiosity, humans began to look beyond the familiar boundaries of their homeland. Climate shifts opened new migration routes. Resources fluctuated, rivers changed course, and so, in waves spread across tens of thousands of years, groups of Homo sapiens began to leave Africa. They crossed Sinai into the Levant, followed coastlines into Arabia and Asia, journeyed through mountain passes into Europe, and eventually ventured as far as Australia, Siberia, and the Americas. It was an odyssey unlike any species had ever undertaken, not driven by conquest, but by the quiet pressures of survival and the profound pull of exploration. Along these routes, humans encountered other beings, cousins from earlier migrations. Among them were the Neanderthals, powerful, intelligent, resilient. The meeting of these two species was not defined solely by conflict or competition. Instead, evidence suggests something far more intimate: interbreeding, shared lives, shared children, shared legacies. The genomes of modern humans still carry traces of this ancient connection, fragments of Neanderthal DNA woven into the tapestry of our species. And yet, Homo sapiens possessed advantages that allowed them to spread farther and faster. Their tools were more versatile, their social networks extended beyond immediate kin. Their ability to create shared symbols, early forms of culture, allowed larger groups to cooperate effectively. As they moved across the world, their technology diversified. Boats to cross seas, coordinated hunts for large prey, fire management to transform forests and shape landscapes. Each innovation multiplied their influence. But the most profound transformation was happening within their minds. Thought became layered and recursive. Memory stretched across generations. Humans began to imagine the invisible spirits, ancestors, meanings that could not be touched but could shape behavior. This was the birth of myth, the emergence of ritual, the foundation of belief systems that strengthened social cohesion and gave shape to identity. Night fires glowed with stories, accounts of hunts, dangers, triumphs, mysteries. Children learned through narrative, not instinct alone. Communities formed traditions that bound them together. Slowly, humanity became not just a biological species, but a cultural one. The world around them was no longer simply inhabited. It was interpreted, remembered, and transformed. As Homo sapiens spread, Neanderthal populations shrank, not because they were inferior, but because the changing climate and fragmented habitats made survival increasingly difficult. In some regions, the two species coexisted for thousands of years. But eventually, the Neanderthal line faded, leaving behind echoes in our DNA and faint traces in archaeological sites where tools, hearths, and pigment-stained stones whisper of lives as rich as our own. By the time humans reached Europe and Asia in full force, something extraordinary was happening. Their creativity exploded. Cave walls became canvases. Bone flutes sang in the dark. Beads, pigments, sculptures, artifacts that carried meaning across time began to multiply. The human mind had crossed a threshold. It was no longer merely surviving, it was expressing. And in that expression lay the beginnings of everything that would one day define civilization: imagination, innovation, storytelling, and the shared dream of what it means to be human. As Homo sapiens continued to spread across continents, something extraordinary began to unfold, something that set our species apart, not through physical strength or speed, but through the boundless power of imagination. Between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, humanity entered what many scientists call the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, a period when creativity surged, symbolic thought intensified, and culture emerged as a dominant evolutionary force. It was as if the human mind had crossed an invisible threshold, unlocking new dimensions of expression, memory, and meaning. Art became one of the first great windows into this transformation. Deep within caves across Europe, Asia, and Africa, early humans painted the walls with animals, symbols, and handprints. These images were not random decorations. They were deliberate, sophisticated, and often astonishingly lifelike. Herds of bison captured in motion, horses rendered with delicate shading, lions, mammoths, rhinoceroses, creatures of immense power summoned into existence through pigment and light. These paintings were acts of storytelling, reverence, and identity, turning stone walls into sacred spaces where memory and myth intertwined. Carved figurines appeared as well, small sculptures of humans, animals, hybrid beings. Some were fertility symbols, others representations of the unseen or the divine. Their existence reveals a profound cognitive shift. Humans were now capable of representing ideas that did not physically exist. This ability to conceive of the imaginary, to envision the intangible, became the cornerstone of human culture. Through it, religion, symbolism, ritual, and abstract thought would flourish. Meanwhile, technology advanced at an unprecedented pace. Stone blades became sharper, more symmetrical, more specialized. Toolkits expanded to include needles, harpoons, bone points, and composite tools made from multiple materials. Humans crafted ropes, nets, baskets, and tailored clothing suited for harsh climates. In colder regions, they built shelters from mammoth bones and hides, creating insulated structures that allowed them to survive Ice Age temperatures. Every invention reflected planning, skill, and the capacity to teach others, a collective intelligence spreading across generations. Social structures grew more intricate as well. Groups formed alliances, shared resources, established territories, and developed norms that guided behavior. Cooperative hunting strategies allowed humans to bring down large prey mammoths, bison, reindeer creatures, far stronger than any individual could handle alone. These hunts required coordination, communication, and trust. Over time, shared values and moral codes emerged, binding communities together through loyalty and identity. Language, though impossible to reconstruct directly, was almost certainly flourishing. Complex grammar, metaphor, narrative, these elements allowed humans to transmit knowledge with precision, to strategize, to console, to inspire. Spoken words became vessels of memory, carrying lessons, stories, fears, and aspirations across time. Through language, humanity became a species of shared imagination, capable of aligning behavior around common myths, goals, and symbols. Trade networks began to stretch across continents. Shells from distant shores appeared hundreds of kilometers inland. Obsidian from volcanic regions was found far from its source. These exchanges were more than material transactions, they were the threads of early globalization, weaving communities into broader cultural webs. Ideas, tools, techniques, and stories traveled with these objects, enriching human societies and accelerating innovation. Ritual practices also grew more elaborate. Burial sites reveal bodies adorned with pigments, beads, and ornaments, signs of care, grief, and belief in something beyond death. Such rituals reflect a mind grappling with existence itself, seeking meaning in the cycle of life and loss. Humans were no longer merely surviving, they were creating purpose. This period marked the true emergence of the modern human mind, a mind capable of reflection, creativity, empathy, abstraction, and transcendent thought. A mind not only shaped by evolution, but capable of shaping evolution in return through technology, culture, and shared knowledge. As Ice Age winds swept across the ancient world, humans stood resilient, not because they were the strongest animals, but because they had become storytellers, toolmakers, dreamers, innovators. In their hands and minds lay the power to transform environments, to collaborate in vast networks, and ultimately to imagine futures that did not yet exist. And this capacity for imagination, innovation, vision, was the spark that would one day build civilizations, craft languages, sculpt monuments, explore planets, and question the universe itself. As the last great ice age loosened its grip on the planet, its frozen breath retreating from valleys and plains, the world began to change in quiet but monumental ways. Glaciers melted, seas rose, and ancient landscapes softened under warmer skies. Forests spread where once there had been only tundra. Rivers meandered into fertile floodplains. Grasslands shimmered with new abundance. In this gentler world, human beings found themselves surrounded not by scarcity, but by possibility. For tens of thousands of years, our ancestors had lived as hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons, following herds, gathering wild plants, and navigating a life in constant motion. Their knowledge of the natural world was deep, intimate, and immediate. They understood the migrations of animals, the cycles of plants, the patterns of stars, the moods of rivers. But as the climate stabilized, something subtle began to shift in the relationship between humans and their environment. The world no longer demanded relentless travel. It began to offer predictability, and in that predictability, new ideas took root. People noticed which plants thrived near their campsites, the ones whose seeds were dropped, trampled, and watered unintentionally. They observed how grains grew densest in disturbed soil, how fruits ripened with seasonal regularity, how certain species responded to care. These observations, accumulated over generations, formed the foundation of a quiet revolution. At first, humans simply encouraged desirable plants. Later, they began to select them. Seeds were saved, scattered, tended. Over centuries, wild grasses transformed into wheat and barley. Bitter plants became sweeter. Small fruits grew larger. Nature, guided by human hands, began to reshape itself. This was the birth of agriculture. With the cultivation of crops came the first true settlements. They were small at first, clusters of huts near rivers, where fertile soil and fresh water made life easier. But even these early villages represented a profound shift. For the first time in human history, people stayed in one place long enough to build structures, store food, and raise families in stable communities. Fire pits burned continuously. Grinding stones wore smooth from years of use. Storage pits and clay vessels protected surplus grain, offering security against seasons of scarcity. The domestication of animals followed closely behind. Wolves, drawn to the edges of human camps, eventually formed bonds that transcended fear. These early dogs became companions, guards, and hunting partners. Goats and sheep provided milk, meat, wool, and hides. Later, cattle and pigs would join them. Each new relationship deepened humanity's influence on the animal world and welcomed new responsibilities in return. Agriculture reshaped society from the ground up. Surpluses allowed populations to grow. Larger communities required cooperation, planning, and shared rules. New labor roles emerged: farmers, builders, toolmakers, caretakers, gatherers. Social bonds strengthened. Rituals evolved around seasons, harvests, births, and deaths. Humans began marking time not by migrations, but by cycles of planting and reaping. And as communities grew, so did culture. Pottery emerged, decorated with intricate patterns. Looms produced woven fabrics. Early shrines and ceremonial spaces appeared, places where people gathered to honor forces they could not see but deeply felt. These spiritual practices bound communities together, giving meaning to the rhythms of life and death. Burials became more elaborate. Artifacts were placed beside the deceased tools, ornaments, symbols of belief. Yet this new life was not without challenges. Sedentary living meant closer proximity to waste, animals, and other humans, increasing disease transmission. Crops could fail. Weather patterns could betray expectations. Territory became precious, and conflicts over land or water grew more common. Humanity had gained stability, but at the cost of increased complexity and interdependence. Still, the momentum of change was unstoppable. From the fertile valleys of the Near East to the riverbanks of China, from the highlands of Mesoamerica to the plains of Africa, agriculture spread, sometimes independently discovered, sometimes exchanged through migration and trade. Wherever it took root, societies transformed. Villages expanded into towns. Towns grew into hubs of trade and ritual. And in the hearts of these emerging communities, new ideas began to spark, ideas of governance, writing, architecture, and collective identity. The seeds of civilization had been planted, and though the people of that time could not foresee it, those first small crops, those first fragile settlements, were the beginning of cities, kingdoms, pyramids, temples, empires, and the entire arc of human history yet to unfold. As centuries flowed into millennia, the quiet revolution of agriculture began to reshape humanity in ways deeper than anyone living at the time could comprehend. Stable food supplies allowed villages to swell into larger communities. Surpluses created the possibility of trade, specialization, and long-term planning. And from these slowly expanding networks of people, the first glimmers of civilization began to emerge. It started in fertile river valleys, places where water, soil, and sunlight combined to support abundant life. Mesopotamia, cradled between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Nile, flowing predictably through Egypt's deserts, the Indus, carving fertile plains across South Asia, the Yellow River, carrying nutrient-rich sediments through ancient China. These landscapes became the great incubators of human complexity. Their cycles of flooding and renewal demanded cooperation, irrigation, labor organization, and shared responsibility. To survive here, people had to plan, and planning, in turn, required structure. Small settlements grew into the first true cities. Within these early urban centers, humanity's social fabric underwent a profound transformation. Houses became permanent, aligned along pathways that slowly hardened into streets. Storage facilities expanded into granaries. Workshops hummed with activity potters shaping clay, metalworkers smelting copper, weavers crafting cloth, toolmakers refining blades and chisels. Trade blossomed, not only within cities but across great distances. Obsidian, lapis lazuli, tin, amber, and precious shells traveled along early trade routes, carrying with them stories, symbols, and ideas. These ideas became the lifeblood of early civilization. For the first time, societies needed ways to record harvests, track debts, mark property, and preserve knowledge across generations. Memory alone was no longer enough. And so, writing was born not as an artistic flourish, but as a practical solution to a growing complexity. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets were pressed with wedge-shaped marks, cuneiform symbols that could capture numbers, goods, names, and even myths. Along the Nile, sacred scribes inked hieroglyphs onto papyrus, transforming human experience into a medium that could outlast any single lifetime. Writing changed everything. It preserved agreements, histories, astronomical observations. It allowed rulers to coordinate vast territories, priests to record rituals, merchants to track wealth, and storytellers to immortalize oral traditions. For the first time, knowledge extended beyond the limits of memory. It became something that could travel across space and time, building upon itself, generation after generation. Urban life also birthed new forms of governance. Leaders emerged, chiefs, councils, kings, charged with organizing irrigation systems, defending territory, and maintaining social order. Temples rose, honoring forces believed to guide the cycles of nature. Religion became a unifying thread, binding communities through shared belief, ritual, and cosmic understanding. Whether through the deities of Mesopotamia, the ancestral spirits of China, or the cosmic order of Egypt, early civilizations sought meaning in the patterns of the universe. Architecture flourished. Massive structures, ziggurats, pyramids, ceremonial plazas lifted human aspirations toward the heavens. These monuments were not simply buildings. They were expressions of collective identity and shared purpose. They required planning, engineering, mathematics, and labor on an unprecedented scale. Such works revealed a species no longer confined by the forces of nature, but daring to reshape the world according to its vision. Yet civilization came with new challenges. Class divisions deepened, wealth and labor stratified, conflicts over land, water, and power escalated. Disease spread more quickly in dense populations. Droughts, floods, and shifting climates could destabilize entire societies. With complexity came vulnerability. But even in these struggles, humanity learned, adapted, and innovated. Tools improved. Bronze replaced stone. Calendars predicted the seasons with precision. Boats crossed seas. Trade routes expanded across continents. Stories, myths, and laws solidified cultural identity. And in every corner of these early cities, marketplaces, workshops, temples, humans continued to do what they had always done: create, imagine, cooperate, and dream. The world was no longer a vast wilderness populated by scattered tribes. It had become a network of civilizations, each shaping its environment, each forming its own understanding of the cosmos, each pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be human. And yet, despite all these advancements, the greatest transformations, the rise of empires, the birth of philosophy, the evolution of science, the flourishing of art still lay ahead. Humanity was only at the dawn of its civilization's story. As centuries passed and civilizations grew more ambitious, humanity entered a new era, one defined not only by survival or settlement, but by organization on a scale that stretched beyond what small communities had ever imagined. This was the age when tools hardened, borders expanded, cultures fused, and entire peoples moved as single, powerful currents through history. It was the age of iron and empires. Iron changed everything. Unlike bronze, which required specific and often scarce combinations of copper and tin, iron was abundant, found in soils, riverbeds, and mountains across continents. Once, humans learned to smelt it through furnaces capable of reaching blistering temperatures. Iron became the backbone of civilization. Stronger tools cut deeper into the earth. Sharper plows opened new farmlands. More durable weapons altered the nature of conflict. Iron empowered societies to build, expand, and defend with unprecedented efficiency. With stronger tools came larger populations. And with larger populations came complexity: cities swelling into urban networks, trade routes extending across vast distances, and territories demanding organization, diplomacy, and leadership. From these pressures emerged the world's first great empires. In Mesopotamia, the Akkadians built centralized rule across sprawling lands. In Egypt, pharaohs unified the Nile Valley under divine kingship, constructing monumental temples and tombs that stood as symbols of cosmic order. Along the Indus and Ganges rivers, early Indian civilizations cultivated rich spiritual and philosophical landscapes. In China, the Shang and Zhou dynasties developed bronze artistry, oracle bone writing, and the earliest foundations of imperial governance. Trade began to link these distant civilizations. Caravans wound across deserts, ships sailed along coasts and through rivers. Ivory, spices, incense, metals, textiles, and precious stones traveled from culture to culture, carrying stories, beliefs, and technologies with them. Slowly, the world became a web of interconnection, a network where ideas could move even faster than armies. And ideas, once they began to flow, transformed everything. Writing systems matured into literature, allowing humans to preserve myths, laws, astronomy, and wisdom in ways that could outlast empires themselves. Mathematics developed first to calculate rations and land divisions, then to predict eclipses and build monuments with astronomical precision. Calendars aligned human rituals with celestial cycles. Philosophies emerged, asking questions not only about the gods or the land, but about the human mind, morality, and the nature of existence. Empires rose from these intellectual foundations. The Persians built an empire that stretched across 3 continents, binding diverse peoples with roads, couriers, and astonishing administrative order. The Greeks sculpted a world of art, democracy, and scientific curiosity. In the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians spread writing systems and maritime trade. Further east, the Zhou dynasty laid the philosophical roots for Confucianism and Taoism, shaping Chinese thought for millennia. In South America, the ancestors of the Andean civilizations began planting the seeds of monumental architecture high in mountain valleys. But empires carried with them both light and shadow. Their wealth depended on labor, sometimes free, often forced. Their borders expanded through diplomacy or conquest. Their stability relied on food, climate, and the delicate balance of power. When these balances faltered due to drought, famine, invasion, or internal conflict, entire civilizations could collapse. Yet even in collapse, knowledge endured, preserved by scribes, monks, merchants, and storytellers. Humanity was no longer a species simply adapting to nature. It was now shaping nature intentionally. Irrigation transformed deserts into farmland. Forests were cleared for cities, roads, and fields. Rivers were diverted to feed growing populations. The environment itself became a canvas shaped by human ambition. And through all these transformations, the human mind expanded. People began to see themselves not just as members of a small tribe or village, but as citizens of vast worlds, kingdoms, empires, and cultures stretching far beyond the horizon. Human identity grew more layered. Human memory grew deeper. Human imagination reached further. This was no longer merely biological evolution. It was cultural evolution, faster, more fluid, and capable of changing the course of history in a single generation. Yet the greatest leaps in thought were still ahead. Empires would rise and fall, but ideas, philosophy, science, art would push humanity into new realms of understanding. And eventually, these realms would lead to revolutions that redefined not only societies, but the very nature of human existence. As empires expanded and cultures intertwined, a new kind of evolution began to unfold, not in the bones or muscles of humanity, but in the architecture of the mind itself. People were no longer simply living within the world. They were questioning it, observing it, debating it, attempting to understand its hidden rules. And from this curiosity emerged the great intellectual awakening of the ancient world, an era in which ideas became as powerful as armies, and questions became a force capable of reshaping civilization. In the city-states of ancient Greece, thinkers gathered in open forums, challenging assumptions about nature, politics, and existence. Philosophy blossomed into a new discipline, one that sought explanations not through myth or divine decree, but through reason. Thales looked to the elements. Pythagoras saw harmony in numbers. Heraclitus found order in change. Socrates asked questions that cut to the core of human identity. Plato envisioned ideal forms beyond the physical world, while Aristotle catalogued the laws of nature with meticulous precision. These thinkers ignited a revolution of the mind, one that taught humanity to analyze, argue, and pursue truth with disciplined inquiry. Elsewhere, intellectual traditions thrived with equal brilliance. In India, sages explored the nature of consciousness, weaving philosophy, mathematics, and metaphysics into vast systems of thought. In China, Confucius articulated moral frameworks for society, while Lao Tzu and the Taoist philosophers sought harmony in the flow of the universe. In the Middle East, scholars invented algebra, developed astronomy, preserved classical knowledge, and led the world in mathematics and medicine. The human mind had become a vast and interconnected network of ideas. Trade routes, most famously the Silk Road, linked continents not only through goods but through stories, technologies, and scientific insights. Stars were charted, time was measured, the movement of planets was predicted. Inventions passed from culture to culture: paper, compasses, water wheels, windmills, early forms of printing. Knowledge began to stack upon itself, forming layers of understanding deeper than any single lifetime could hold. The scientific method, though not yet formalized, was awakening in the human psyche. Observation, hypothesis, testing, refinement, a systematic pursuit of nature's truths. And yet, for all this progress, humanity still lived in a world illuminated by firelight, bounded by the rhythms of muscle, wind, and animal strength. Empires rose and fell, knowledge flourished, was lost, and rediscovered. But beneath the turbulence of history, one constant endured. The human mind was evolving into something capable of reshaping its world through thought alone. This momentum, slow, powerful, unstoppable, was leading toward a transformation that would alter the course of life on Earth forever. A transformation born not of biology, but of imagination, inquiry, and the relentless pursuit of understanding. The world was on the edge of the modern age, and the spark that would ignite it was already flickering in the hearts of dreamers, scholars, and pioneers across the ancient world. As centuries unfurled, the threads of human knowledge wove themselves into patterns ever more intricate. The Renaissance revived ancient wisdom and blended it with new discovery. The Enlightenment transformed curiosity into method. The scientific revolution shattered the boundaries of the known world. Telescopes extended sight into the heavens. Microscopes revealed invisible universes. Mathematics unlocked hidden symmetries. Experiments replaced superstition. Reason replaced dogma. Humanity had entered a new phase of evolution, cultural evolution, at the speed of thought. Steam engines bent the power of heat to human will. Electricity illuminated the night. Medicine extended life. Factories transformed labor. Trains and ships united continents. Later, flight lifted humanity into the skies, and computers compressed centuries of knowledge into fragile circuits of silicon and light. Finally, in the 20th century, a species born from ancient primates stepped off its home world and onto the surface of another celestial body. When boots pressed into moon dust, the echo of that moment carried across the cosmos, a quiet reminder that life, through billions of years of struggle and change, had evolved into something capable of understanding the universe and itself. But despite all this progress, something deeper remained unchanged, the same spark that guided the first primates through the branches, the same curiosity that shaped blades from stone, the same stories whispered around ancient fires, the same wonder felt by early humans gazing upward at a sky they could not yet comprehend. We are the continuation of that story. Every cell in our bodies carries echoes of that primordial ocean where life first stirred. Every breath we take follows patterns shaped by ancestors who walked the savannas. Every choice, every creation, every question is part of a lineage stretching back through the entire history of life on Earth. Evolution did not end with us. It moves through us, in our minds, in our cultures, in our technologies, in our dreams of the future. We are the outcome of billions of years of adaptation, chance, catastrophe, and resilience. But we are also the first species capable of looking back on that journey with awareness of understanding the path from ancient bacteria to early animals, from dinosaurs to mammals, from primates to humans. The story of evolution is not merely the story of life. It is the story of consciousness awakening, the story of a universe that, through life, became capable of wondering about itself. And now, as we stand at the edge of new frontiers, space exploration, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, we are writing the next chapter of this ancient narrative. What comes next will not only define our future, but will echo across the deep currents of time. For in the end, evolution is not a tale of progress or perfection. It is a tale of change, of survival, of possibility. And we fragile, curious, ever-reaching humans are its latest expression. The story continues, and it continues with us.